How many years? You know the number. That's the strange thing about lost years. Nobody ever has to look it up. You could say it right now, out loud, without checking anything. 4, 9, 17. It's sitting right there because you've counted it before. More than once. Usually at an hour when you should have been asleep. And you know exactly which years they were. You could name the season they started and the thing that ended them.
You know what you were supposed to be doing in them, because you can watch other people doing it. People who are now where you would have been.
Who are talking about their kids' graduations while you are doing arithmetic in your head at a party. There's a line on your resume you've rewritten 11 times because you don't know how to explain a gap. There's a box in the garage you have not opened. There's a photograph from that year that you cannot look at, and you know exactly which drawer it's in. So let me say the thing you came here to hear, and then let me be honest with you about it, because you deserve both. There is a verse in the book of Joel where God says, "I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten." The years, not the crops, not the money, the years. That verse has been printed on more coffee mugs than almost anything else in the Old Testament, and I think most people who love it have never read the sentence it's sitting in, which is a shame, because the rest of that sentence is far stranger and far better than the part on the mug. Now here's my honesty. I am not going to stand here and promise you that God is going to hand back the specific thing you lost. I don't know that. Nobody does. Some of what those years took is not coming back on this side, and a preacher who tells you otherwise is going to cost you your faith on the day it doesn't arrive. What I can do is show you from Scripture how God actually restores. Not how we wish He did, how He does. There's a mechanism, it's consistent, and it shows up in story after story. And when you see it, some of the last decade is going to look different to you. 2 things I'm holding until the end. There's one word in that verse in Joel that English can't quite carry. Most Bibles have to flatten it into something smaller. That word is the difference between a promise you can actually hold and a promise that will break your heart. It comes last. And number 3 on this list is the one that made me angry at God for about 2 years, because the man in that story never got back the thing he actually lost. Not ever. Stay for that one, because when I finally understood it, it healed something in me that nothing else could touch. Let's go. The first way God restores is by yield, not by rewind. Go read the first chapter of Joel sometime, because it is one of the bleakest chapters in the Bible and nobody preaches it. It describes wave after wave of locusts. One kind eats, and what's left the next kind eats, and what those leave the next kind takes. 4 passes. Stripped fields, bare branches, a nation standing in a landscape where there is nothing left to harvest. That's the setup for the promise. And notice what the promise does not say. It does not say, "I will give you back that spring." It does not say, "I will uneat the grain." Time doesn't run that way in this book, and God never once pretends it does. Read what He actually offers. He says He'll send rain, the autumn rains and the spring rains, the way it used to be. He says the threshing floors will be full of grain, and the vats will overflow with new wine and oil. He says you'll eat until you're full. That's not a rewind, that's a harvest. He doesn't turn the calendar back. He turns the ground productive again, and then gives yields so heavy that the ledger changes. And here's the physical picture I want you to carry through this whole message, because everything else hangs on it. Locusts eat crops. They cannot eat soil. They can't. It's not in them. They strip what grew, and then they leave, and the field is still there. The same acres, the same dirt, the same depth. What you lost in those years was the yield. What you did not lose was the ground. I know that sounds like small comfort at first. It isn't. Because a person with no harvest and good soil is in a completely different situation than a person with no land at all, and most of you have been grieving as though the land was taken. Not a rewind, a harvest. And there's one more thing in that first chapter that I want you to see, because it's the first instruction God gives a generation standing in a stripped field, and it is not what you'd expect. Before the promise of rain, before the threshing floors, before any of it, He tells them, "Tell your children about this. Have them tell their children. And have those children tell the next generation." Read that again in context. A nation has just lost everything to 4 waves of locusts, and the first assignment is not rebuild, not even pray. It's talk about it, out loud, to the people coming after you, which means the ruined years were being converted into something on the very first day, before a single seed went back into the ground. I think about that with the box in your garage. I think about that with the years on your resume you can't explain. Somewhere down the line there is a person who needs to hear exactly what happened to you and exactly what it cost. And the telling is not a bonus that comes after the recovery. In Joel, the telling starts before the rain does. Stop asking God for the calendar. Start asking Him for rain. The second way God restores is through a door other than the one it left by. I want to tell you about a woman who came home to her town with nothing and told the neighbors to stop using her name. Naomi had left that town years earlier with a husband and 2 sons, and she comes back with none of them. All 3 are dead in a foreign country, and she walks back into her hometown as a widow with no children, which in that world isn't just grief, it's destitution. And the women recognize her and start calling her name, and she stops them. "Don't call me Naomi," she says. "Call me Mara, call me bitter, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." And then the sentence that I think is the most honest line spoken by any woman in the Old Testament: "I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty." She's not being dramatic. Look at the arithmetic, she's right. And here's the part that matters for you. Everything Naomi wanted back came through the one channel she tried to send away. Because on the road home, she had told both of her daughters-in-law to go. Not once, she pressed them, repeatedly. Go back to your mother's houses. Go back to your own people. She had no obligation to offer them, and she knew she was nobody's future. Orpah went. And Ruth, a foreigner, a Moabite, a woman from a nation Israel had every historical reason to keep at arm's length, refused to leave. Naomi did not want that. Read the chapter. She isn't grateful in that scene. She's a woman too far gone to argue. And years later, Naomi is sitting in that same town holding a baby boy, and the neighborhood women say something to her that should stop you cold. They tell her this child will renew her life and sustain her in old age, and then they say why. Because your daughter-in-law, who loves you, is better to you than 7 sons, 7 sons. To a woman who lost 2. And the women of the town say, out loud, Naomi has a son. That baby's name was Obed. Obed's son was Jesse. Jesse's son was David. And if you trace that line far enough forward, it arrives in a stable in Bethlehem. The bitter woman with the empty hands ends up in the family line of the Messiah, and not one bit of it came back through the door she lost it through. Her son stayed dead. Her husband stayed dead. What she got instead came walking beside her on a road, from a country she'd have said was the wrong one, wearing a face she had tried 3 times to send home. Not the same door, a better one. So here's the law. God rarely restores through the channel you lost it through, and if you're only watching that one door, you'll miss the delivery entirely. Look around. The thing that's been quietly refusing to leave your life, the friendship that stayed when it had no reason to, the small, strange opportunity that keeps circling back, the person you almost pushed away, check that. Don't assume it's a consolation prize. In this book, it's usually the whole thing. The third way God restores is that He gives back the table before He gives back the body, and sometimes He never gives back the body at all. This is the one I told you about. This is the one I was angry about. There's a boy in 2 Samuel whose whole life changes in about 4 seconds, and none of it is his fault. He's 5 years old. Word arrives that his father and grandfather have both been killed in the same battle. His father was Jonathan. His grandfather was King Saul. And in that world, when a dynasty falls, the household runs. Because the next king kills the last king's family. It's not paranoia, it's procedure. So his nurse grabs him and runs. Somewhere in that panic, she drops him. And the text tells you the result in one flat clause. He became lame in both feet, 5 years old. A grown woman's fear, a set of stairs or a threshold, and a boy who will never walk again. He didn't do anything. He wasn't there for the war. He was a child being carried by somebody who was doing her best. His name was Mephibosheth, and he grew up in a place called Lo-Debar, a name usually taken to mean something like no pasture, nowhere. The kind of town whose name is a description now. Years pass, decades. He's a grown man with a son of his own, hiding in a nothing town, and every single day of his adult life he has understood one thing about his situation. The new king cannot afford to let me live. And then one day soldiers come for him. Sit with that for a second. Men from the palace arrive at the door of a disabled man in hiding, and they carry him, He can't walk, so somebody carries him, the whole way to the capital, into the throne room, and set him down in front of David. He believes he is being carried to his execution. That is the only thing this can be. And what actually happened is that David had been asking a question for years. Is there anyone left of Saul's house I can show kindness to for Jonathan's sake? For Jonathan's sake, not for Mephibosheth's. The man on the floor of that throne room had done nothing to earn what was about to happen. It was all being done in the name of a relationship he wasn't even part of. David says, "Don't be afraid. I'm going to restore to you every acre that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." And Mephibosheth says the sentence that tells you what 30 years in Lo-debar does to a man. He says, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" That's what he thought he was. Now here's why this chapter has never left me alone. Go read the last line of it. After all of it, the land restored, the servants assigned, the seat at the royal table, the total reversal of a ruined life. The writer ends the chapter with this: "And he lived in Jerusalem, because he always ate at the king's table. And he was lame in both feet." The author says it again, at the end, on purpose. He got the land back. He got the name back. Got the table. He never got the legs. And I have heard preachers say the tablecloth hid his feet, so at the table he looked like everybody else. That is not in the text, and I'm not going to add words to scripture to make you feel better. What is in the text is one word, and it's better than the tablecloth. Always. He always ate at the king's table, not on holidays. Not when he was presentable. Every night, for the rest of his life, a man who could not walk to the table was carried to it, and a king who owed him nothing kept a seat open. But let me be honest with you, because some of you are living in this one. Some of you are going to get the table and not the legs. The marriage isn't coming back. The person isn't coming back. The body doesn't work the way it did in 2014, and it isn't going to. And I'm not going to insult you by pretending the table and the legs are the same thing. They're not. He wanted his legs. Of course he did. But look at what he got. He got carried into the room he was most afraid of and told to sit down and stay. Not the legs, the table. And I want you to hold on to why any of it happened, because it's the part that keeps this from being a nice story about a generous king. David didn't go looking for Mephibosheth. He went looking for anyone left of Saul's house, for Jonathan's sake. Years earlier, before any of them were kings or cripples, David and Jonathan had made a promise to each other, and Jonathan had been dead for a long time by the time those soldiers knocked on a door in Lo-debar. So the man being carried into that throne room was not being rewarded. He hadn't done anything. He couldn't have. He was being handed the benefits of a covenant made by somebody else, kept by somebody else, on a day he wasn't even present for. That's why he says the dead dog line. He knows the math doesn't work. There is no version of his resume that gets him to that table. And I don't think I need to draw you a picture of what that echoes. Every seat any of us has at that table was arranged before we got there, in a conversation we weren't part of, on the strength of a relationship that wasn't ours. Take a breath with me. All the way down, and out slower than you think you need to. That's 3 ways. Rain instead of a rewind, a different door, a table that doesn't fix everything and doesn't have to. Let's pray one line, and if you're driving, keep your eyes open. Lord, I have been grieving my land when what I lost was one season's crop. Show me the difference tonight. If any of this is landing on you, leave 5 words in the comments. For you, and for whoever scrolls past next and needs to see somebody say it first. The soil is still mine. The 4th way is the one that surprised me most when I finally slowed down and counted. The 4th way God restores is by doubling what can be doubled, and refusing to double what can't. Everybody knows how the book of Job ends. He gets it all back, twice over. It's the tidiest ending in the Old Testament, and honestly it's the part of that book people are quietest about, because after 39 chapters of the hardest questions in Scripture, a happy ending can feel almost insulting. But do the arithmetic. I mean, actually do it, because I don't think most people ever have. At the start of the book, Job has 7,000 sheep. At the end, 14,000. He had 3,000 camels, now 6,000. 500 yoke of oxen become 1,000. 500 donkeys become 1,000. Every single number, exactly doubled. The text is being precise on purpose, and then it tells you about his children. At the beginning of the book, Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. At the end, after everything, the text says, He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, the same number. Everything else in that chapter is doubled with mathematical care, and the children are not. And the book offers no explanation whatsoever. It just says it and moves on. I don't know for certain what that means. Nobody does. But there's an old reading of that passage that I've carried for a long time, and it goes like this. You don't double children because the first 10 were never actually subtracted. Livestock you replace. People, you do not. Job didn't have 10 more children. He had 20, and 10 of them were somewhere he couldn't visit yet. I can't prove that from the text. I'm telling you it's a reading, not a fact. But notice what the text does do with those new daughters, because this part is not speculation. It names them, Jemima, Keziah, Karen Hapuch, and it doesn't name the sons. In a book written in that world, at that time, that is a loud choice. And then it says something almost unheard of, that their father gave them an inheritance alongside their brothers. A man who lost everything came out the other side and did something in his family that nobody around him was doing. Here's the law, not everything in your life is replaceable, and God does not insult you by pretending it is. That's not a limitation on his power, that's respect. A God who handed you a replacement for a person would be telling you the first one was interchangeable, and he will not say that about someone you loved. So he doubles the livestock, and he does not double the children, and he lets the 10 stay exactly as irreplaceable as they were. And then the book does one more thing with time, and it's the reason this story belongs in a message about lost years. It says Job lived 140 years after this, and that he saw his children, and their children, to the 4th generation. Sit with that number for a second. Not the years he lost, the years he got after. Job never got that first decade back. Not one day of it. What he got was so much time on the other side of it that he outlived the grief by 4 generations. Long enough to hold great-great-grandchildren. Long enough that there were people in his house who only ever knew him as an old man who was gentle with children and gave his daughters an inheritance. The ones who had watched him on the ash heap eventually died. The ones who bounced on his knee had never seen it. That's a kind of restoration nobody puts on a coffee mug, and it's the one most of us actually get. Not the years back, but years forward. And enough of them, that the worst season stops being the middle of your story and becomes the early part of it. The 5th way God restores is that he makes the lost years into the material. Now I need to be careful here, because there's a cheap version of this that gets said to grieving people all the time, and it does damage. I am not going to tell you it was worth it. That is not my sentence to say about your life. I've watched people have that sentence handed to them at the worst possible moment, by someone who meant well, and I've watched what it does to their face. What I'm going to tell you is something narrower and, I think, sturdier. Paul writes to a church in Corinth and calls God the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, and then he says why God comforts us. He says it so that we can comfort people in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves received. Read the mechanism there. Comfort comes in and comfort goes out, and the thing that goes out is made of the thing that came in. It's not a general kindness. It's the specific comfort you received in your specific pit, handed to the next person in a pit shaped like yours. Which means those years produce something. Now, not something that justifies them, something that came out of them. Here's the picture, and it's the one that finally got through to me. Interest only exists because of time. That's the whole thing. There's no such thing as interest on an account that was opened this morning. The return is not calculated in spite of the years. It is calculated from them. Time is not the obstacle to the payment. Time is the input. And I think there is a version of you that could not exist without those years. And I don't mean that as a compliment about your character. I mean it flatly and mechanically. There are sentences you can say in a room that nobody else in that room is able to say. There are people who will only ever be reachable by somebody who has been where you've been, and they can tell in about 90 seconds whether you have. You know the moment. Somebody is falling apart, and everyone in the room is offering the good advice that has never helped anyone, and you say one sentence, the short, unimpressive, deeply specific one, and their head comes up. That sentence cost you 9 years. It's also the only currency that works in that room. Look at the man who wrote that letter to Corinth. Before he was Paul, he was hunting Christians house to house. He never got those years back, and he never pretended he did. And then he spent the rest of his life as the one man in the early church who could look at somebody with an unforgivable past and say, with total authority, I know exactly what you're describing, and he took me anyway. Nobody else could say that with the same weight. That authority was bought with the worst years of his life. Here's the law. You were not disqualified by those years. You were sourced by them, not wasted, sourced. Sixth way God restores is the one that isn't about time at all. It's about your name. There's a woman in Mark's gospel who has been bleeding for 12 years. 12. Say it slowly. That's the number I asked you for at the start of this, and it's hers. And for her, under the law of that time, that wasn't only a medical condition. It made her continually unclean, which meant she couldn't go to the temple, and it meant that anything she sat on and anyone she touched became unclean too. So read what those 12 years actually were. 12 years without worship. 12 years of people stepping back when she came near, of relatives adjusting their plans, of being the reason a room got complicated. 12 years without being touched. And the text says she had suffered a great deal under many doctors and had spent everything she had, and instead of getting better, she grew worse. So add poverty to it, and add the particular humiliation of having paid for hope over and over. And Jesus is walking through a crowd on his way to something urgent. A synagogue leader's daughter is dying, and every minute counts, and everybody in that street knows it. And she comes up behind him and touches his cloak. Behind him, that's the detail. She does not stand in front of him and ask. 12 years of being the contamination in every room taught her exactly how to move through a crowd, from the back, quickly, touching as little as possible, taking what she needed without making anyone look at her. And she's healed instantly. She feels it in her body. Now she could go. She has what she came for. Nobody knows. And he stops. In the middle of an emergency, with a dying child at the other end of the street, he stops the entire procession and asks who touched him. And the disciples tell him what anybody would. There's a crowd. Everyone's touching you. This is not a question. And she comes and falls down in front of him, shaking. And the text says she told him the whole truth. In public. All of it. 12 years of it, out loud, in front of the same neighbors who had been avoiding her since before Jairus' daughter was born. And he answers her with one word first. Daughter. I've looked and I can't find another place in the Gospels where he calls someone that. Then, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. She already had the healing. He stopped for the name. That's the whole point. He could have let her slip away cured and anonymous, and she'd have been physically fine and still, socially, the woman with the condition. He held up a medical emergency so that the town that had excluded her for 12 years would hear him call her daughter in the street. And it cost something. While he was still speaking, the messengers arrived to say the little girl had died. And here's the detail Mark drops at the end that I don't think is an accident. That little girl was 12 years old. She had been alive exactly as long as the other woman had been bleeding. Here's the law. God does not do restoration privately. He does it where the shame happened. Not shame, a name. Now let me give you the verse. The whole verse. Not the part on the mug. Here's what Joel actually says. I will repay you for the years the locusts have eaten. And then it lists them. The great locust and the young locust, and the other locusts, and the swarm. 4 waves, all of it. And then it ends with 6 words that I had read past for 20 years. My great army that I sent among you. Read it again. He calls the locusts his army. And he says he sent them. I'm not going to smooth that over for you. That is not a comfortable sentence, and I don't fully understand it, and I'd rather tell you that than hand you a tidy explanation I don't actually have. There are things in this book I can't resolve, and the relationship between God's hand and the worst seasons of a person's life is at the top of the list. Anyone who tells you they've got that one fully worked out is telling you about their confidence, not about the text. But I can tell you what that line does inside this promise. And it changes everything. It means the one offering to repay you is not a bystander. He's not an insurance company processing a claim on a disaster he had nothing to do with. He's not a neighbor bringing a casserole over about something terrible that happened down the street. Whatever happened in those years, he is not standing outside it at a polite distance expressing sympathy. And here's why that matters practically. Only the party who owns the loss can settle it. Everyone else can only apologize. Which brings me to the word I've been holding since the beginning. The Hebrew word behind repay in that verse is a word most English Bibles have to squeeze into one syllable, and the squeezing costs something. The word is shalom. It does not primarily mean rewind, and it does not primarily mean replace. Its center of gravity is making something whole, complete. Nothing missing, nothing out of place. It's also the word you'd use for settling a debt, paying it in full, closing the account. And if that sound is familiar, it should be. It's the root behind the word shalom, which we translate as peace, and which has never once meant the absence of trouble. Shalom is wholeness. It's everything present and accounted for. So hear what God is actually promising in Joel. He is not saying, I will give you that spring back. He's saying something bigger and stranger. I will make this whole. I will settle it in full. Here's the master law of this entire message, and if you take one line out of tonight, take this one. He does not give the years back, he settles them. And I want you to notice that a settlement is the larger promise, not the smaller one. Rewind would only put you back at the beginning of the same decade with the same blind spots and no idea what was coming. That's not restoration, that's a rerun. A settlement is a different category. Family is like an ocean, vast and full of love. A settlement means somebody with authority looked at the total damage, named it, took responsibility for the account, and paid it out. And the payout is not required to look like the loss. It's required to be enough. So put the whole thing together now, because all 6 ways are the same single move. Locusts eat crops. They cannot eat soil. He does not restore the crop. He never does. He restores the field and he sends rain, and then he fills the threshing floor so full that the arithmetic changes. He opens a door on a road you weren't watching. He carries a man who can't walk to a table and leaves the seat there forever. He doubles what can be doubled and refuses to insult you about what can't. He takes the worst years you have and turns them into the only currency that works in certain rooms. And he stops a procession in the middle of the street to say your name in front of the people who stopped saying it. And one more honest thing, because I've been honest with you all the way through, and I'm not going to quit in the last 5 minutes. Some of these settlements are not finished on this side. Joel's harvest came, but it came after the locusts. Mephibosheth ate at that table for the rest of his life and never walked to it once. Job got 140 more years and 4 generations, and he never got those first 10 children back in this world. The account gets settled in full. Full is just a longer horizon than by December. Take a breath. All the way down. Now, let me put it in your hands, and I'm going to do it as plainly as I can. Stop asking for the calendar. Ask for rain. Stop staring at the door it left through. Watch the one that keeps opening. Stop measuring the table against the legs. Take the seat. Stop waiting for a replacement for something irreplaceable. He isn't going to offer you one. And that's mercy, not neglect. Stop calling those years empty. They are the only source of the one sentence somebody needs from you this year. And stop hiding at the back of the crowd. He stops processions for names. Now think honestly about your own number, the one you said out loud at the beginning. Which of those 6 is he actually doing in your life right now? Is it rain on ground you thought was dead? Is it a door you keep ignoring because it's the wrong shape? Is it a table you've been refusing because you're still angry about the legs? Or is it that he's been trying to hand you a name in public and you keep slipping out the back? Don't tell me. Don't type it. Tell him, because he's the only one who has both the full ledger and the authority to close it. And before I let you go, I want to leave you somewhere warm. You know the story about the son who took his inheritance early and spent it. And you know he came back, and you know his father ran. But here's the detail I want you to hold. That boy had a speech. He wrote it in a pig field, and he rehearsed it the whole way home. I've sinned. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Make me a hired hand. He gets about half of it out, and the father doesn't argue with the speech. He doesn't correct it. He just turns to the servants and starts calling for a robe and a ring and sandals and a calf, right over the top of it, while the boy is still talking. And here's what I want you to notice, and then I'm done. In that entire story, the father never once mentions the money. Not the amount, not the years, not what it was spent on or where. The older brother brings it up, itemized, but the father never does. He was never running an audit. He was watching a road. That's your accounting. That's who's holding the ledger on those years. So here's the one thing I want you to do this week. 1, not a program. Take that number, the number you knew without looking it up, and this week, do one thing that only a person who lived those particular years could do. Say the sentence to the person who needs it. Sit with the one nobody else knows how to sit with. Make the phone call you're uniquely qualified to make. not to redeem the time. He does that part. Just to plant something in soil the locusts never touched. Let's pray. Father, I have spent a long time grieving a field I still own. Thank you that you never once asked me to pretend it didn't hurt. Send rain on the ground I gave up on. Open the door I've been ignoring. Give me the courage to take the seat at the table even while I'm still limping. And where the settlement isn't finished in this life, hold the account open and hold me steady until it is. Amen. One thing I'll ask, and I ask it as ministry. Somebody you know is doing that arithmetic tonight. They wouldn't call it that. They'd say they're fine. Send this to them. Don't write a paragraph, just send it. And leave 5 words in the comments, for you and for the next person who needs to see somebody go first. The soil is still mine, because it is. They took the crop. They never touched the ground. And the one who owns the account has already named the amount he intends to pay. God bless you, my brother, my sister. Until next time.